This conference will now be recorded.
Awesome. It seems like most people have signed in. We'll just give it a few more minutes, maybe just a minute or two for a few more people to join us, and then we'll get started. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you all for taking the time this afternoon to join us for this second Core Planning Committee meeting. You'll see here, if you haven't already signed in, I'm a broken record when it comes to the sign in, but please go ahead and either use the SurveyMonkey, the link and the QR code both go to the same SurveyMonkey sign in survey. You can also email myself at avanderswag, that's VANDERZWAAG at burtonplanning.com. We're just looking for your name, your phone number, and who you're representing at this meeting. You can also text me directly if you've called in. I know sometimes we have a few people that call in using their phones. If you have done that, you can text me at 614-406-7775 with your name and email and your job title. That works too. That link to the SurveyMonkey will be posted in the chat, so that way you can just click on that if you have not already. We'll make sure that's in the chat as a fresh link for you to follow. You can also just type your name directly into the chat and we'll make sure that you're counted here. But we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you all for taking the time to join us this afternoon. So I guess I'm curious, there are 14 of us total on the call. If you would just take a moment and have everyone just kind of say your name and who you're representing here on the call today. So I guess I'll start. My name is Anna Vanderswag. I am an associate planner with Burton Planning Services. I do a lot of the public involvement. So some of you, if you joined us at the first meeting, you'll recognize me. I guided you through the first meeting. I'll go ahead and let my coworkers introduce themselves as well.
My name is Brett Morris. I'm an associate planner at Burton Planning Services as well. And I'll be mostly working on data analysis, mapping, and modeling some of the hazards.
Hi, I'm Ruchi Agarwal. I'm an associate planner at Burton Planning. I am going to be assisting with research and plan development as well as the public meetings.
Great, and then I know we have two representatives from the EMA on the call. I know Tom is coming and going, but I'll let you two introduce yourselves as well.
Yep, Tom Berger, EMA Director here in Allen County. Thank you to everyone who is participating, and Travis Philhart, Assistant Director, on the call as well.
Great. And then if the others just want to unmute yourself, just say your name and who you're representing on the meeting.
Hi there, I'm Becca Scheidler with the Area Agency on Aging 3, and I am the Vice President of Mobility Management.
Hi, I'm Gene Smith from Mercy House St. Rita's Medical Center. I'm the Chief of the Campus Police here and the Emergency Management Director.
Hi, I'm Adam Honhurst from Lima Allen County Regional Planning. I'm the resident engineer here. Shane Coleman, our Executive Director, will also be joining us from this office.
Brian Rhodes, Allen County Engineer.
Jim Baker, Lyon Police Department.
Amber Martin, United Way.
Brendan Fisher with Allen County Public Health. I'll be in and out of this meeting.
Dave Berger from the City of Lima.
Great. Well, thank you all. It seems like we have a great group here today to work through and progress on the hazard mitigation plan for the county. I know that it sounds like with the county being upgraded to red today in relation to COVID, some of you may be busy. So we'll try to go through this and get you on with your day. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. So a little bit more housekeeping related to having the virtual format of these meetings. Again, there are multiple ways for you to sign in. If you have any questions on that, feel free to type it in the chat. You can also just unmute yourself and ask. I am not recalling the number to unmute yourself if you've called in. Tom, do you remember that off the top of your head?
Yep, *6.
*6, perfect. So if any of you are on the phone and you have a question, you can unmute yourself with *6. We're just going to try to keep everyone muted to prevent any background noise during this meeting. But if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to just chime in and ask. We welcome your feedback. We welcome any sorts of questions that you have. Again, I know I said this at the first meeting, but we have a website for the project. It's burtonplanning.com/allen-HMP. I'll take a moment here to show you what that website looks like. We have updated it slightly for today's meeting. So you'll see all of the meeting materials from the first meeting are still there. If you were unable to attend the first meeting, there are videos of that first meeting. They're in parts, but you can go over the presentation and then each of the surveys with us if you were unable to attend those. We do invite you to complete all of the surveys from the first meeting if you have not done so already. Those can be accessed here on the website. And then for today's meeting, the agenda and presentation are both on the website, as well as the one survey we'll be doing today. So if you have any questions about the website, we'll have one of my colleagues will post that in the chat so you can have quick access to it. But please, again, don't hesitate to ask any questions. We'll jump right back into the presentation here. Each survey, there are physical versions that you can just print and fill out by hand and scan in and send or mail or fax to the EMA. There are instructions for that on the website. There are also fillable PDFs that you can download and just fill out on your computer if you prefer. And then there's also a SurveyMonkey version of that. These surveys are, this one is pretty long. You should be able to come and go from that survey on SurveyMonkey. But if you prefer to be able to review all your work at once, I think we'd recommend the fillable form that you can print and just save and continue working on then over the next couple days if you need. Are there any questions over the website? All right. So today we are continuing from the first meeting. We are updating the 2016 Allen County Hazard Mitigation Plan. So today I'll give you an overview. It will be a summary of the information that we had from the first meeting, so some of it may seem familiar. And I'll give you a progress update on what we've done since the previous meeting. And we'll take a look at some of those survey results from that first meeting. And then the bulk of today will be spent gathering your input on all of the mitigation actions. These are projects that can be used at the jurisdictional level, at the county level, to reduce risk associated with each of the hazards in the plan. And then we'll go over next steps. This is the second meeting out of 2, so there won't be any further meetings that you will need to join, but we are asking for some feedback going forward. So we'll go over that. All right, so we'll jump into the overview of hazard mitigation. Hazard mitigation is a sustained action to reduce or eliminate the long-term risk to human life and property that are caused from hazardous events. The goals of this planning process are to reduce potential losses from any future disasters. We're also identifying natural hazards and associated actions or projects that can be implemented to reduce loss associated with those hazards. And finally, we are looking to establish a process to implement those actions. So today, the purpose of today is to gather your feedback and create an implementation or prioritization plan for each of the jurisdictions as well as the county in order to follow and conduct these projects to reduce risk and reduce the potential for loss from these hazards going forward. So an overview of potential types of hazards that can be included in the plan. You have things like flooding, dam failure, you have your hurricanes, tornadoes, damaging winds. You have the severe summer storms as well as severe winter storms. And then you have the hazards that are from a lack of water, so drought, wildfires, extreme heat, geology-based hazards such as landslides, earthquakes. You have invasive species, and then you have the human-caused hazards such as hazardous materials and terrorism. And I'll give you a list of what we came up with at the previous meeting in a little bit. So then when we're looking at the disaster response cycle, hazard mitigation it occurs well before a disaster takes place. So the hazard mitigation plan comes even ahead of an emergency operations plan. An emergency operations plan comes into play when a disaster is imminent. And then during a disaster, you have the short-term emergency aid and assistance. And then after a disaster, you have the post-disaster recovery plan. There are 2 laws that sort of form the legal foundation for hazard mitigation planning. The first is the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. And this says that presidential disaster declarations can trigger federal assistance through FEMA. Then the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000 formed the legal basis for FEMA requiring state, local, and tribal mitigation planning. So this is what says that jurisdictions must have an adopted plan to receive funds from FEMA in the event of a disaster. So if your jurisdiction is looking to receive funding from FEMA after significant flooding or a tornado, you need to have an adopted hazard mitigation plan. And so that's what we're doing here. That's why your participation is so critical to this planning process. So there are some other requirements to this plan. The first is, in order to receive FEMA funding, hazard mitigation plans must be adopted by local jurisdictions. So that's what we just said, but they also have to be updated every 5 years. You know, the hazard and threat level of each hazard, that changes over time. So now you see a lot more I mean, especially in this planning process, you see a lot more concern for things like epidemic and pandemic, whereas you wouldn't have seen that 10 years ago. Hazard mitigation plans also must include public participation and documentation of that participation. That's why I emphasize your sign-in sheet so much. So we appreciate you doing that. We also take a look at existing conditions and demographics of Allen County. We review any major disaster declarations that have taken place since the previous plan in 2016, and we'll perform risk assessments and vulnerability analyses for each hazard that you identified. We will also review all of the projects, all of the mitigation actions that were included in the previous plan. We will suggest new ones based on your concerns at the moment, and we'll also ask you to provide feedback on those projects. So there are several types of projects that can receive federal funding. These types of projects include things like property acquisition, demolition, relocation, property reconstruction, structure elevation, floodproofing, and retrofitting. Jurisdictions can receive funding for generators and safe rooms and projects related to soil stabilization. So there's a wide variety of projects that you can get funding for if they are included in this plan. So they must be included in this plan if they're related to hazard mitigation, if you would like to receive federal funding for those types of projects. So there are a lot of benefits that can come as a result of this planning process. The first being that you'll minimize property damage and economic losses, injuries, and loss of human life as a result of these hazards. You'll also enhance public awareness and education of natural and man-made hazards. And this process also allows for the coordination of interjurisdictional preparedness measures, projects, and programs for efficient and effective implementation. And it also provides tools for decision makers to better prepare for disasters. This process also allows the county and jurisdictions to achieve state and federal regulatory compliance in order to be eligible for funding. On a more specific breakdown of some of these benefits, municipalities, they can receive funds for building and infrastructure needs, such as addressing issues caused by hazards or improvements to building and infrastructure in order to reduce future issues. Police, fire, and schools can receive funds for safety-related equipment and resources. Businesses can reduce or eliminate site and operational impacts from hazards by participating in this process. And the general public can reduce or eliminate monetary and emotional costs associated with lost lives, lost property, lost homes from hazard events. So that's the brief overview. Again, that was included in the first meeting last month, so I kind of went through that quickly. Does anyone have any questions over any of that? All right, then we'll go ahead and give you an update on the status of the Allen County plan. So far we've gathered critical facility information, done some GIS-based mapping, and collected repetitive loss information. We've also summarized features and demographics of the county and its communities. We've collected historical information of previous hazard events, and we've identified past and potential hazards to evaluate in this plan update. We've also identified mitigation actions from the previous plan that need to be included and updated in this plan. We've also eliminated some actions that have been completed already. So going forward, we are looking for your feedback on how to prioritize all of the projects that are included in this plan, and that's what we are doing today. So the hazard mitigation planning process includes 8 milestones. And today with this meeting, this is the completion of the 4th milestone. So after today, we will be preparing a draft plan and then conducting reviews of that plan. And in that process, we will be looking to you to provide feedback on our assessments, our risk assessments and vulnerability analyses related to the plan. So this is a visual of the calendar. When we are looking to finalize the plan, we are ultimately looking to have the plan adopted by January of 2021. So today with milestone 3, that's the second planning meeting. And then milestone 6, that is when we will be looking to you for some reviews of the draft plan. At that point, we'll have a complete draft plan with all of our assessments of each hazard. So later this year, end of fall, we'll be looking for you some more feedback from you in that process. So today I'll provide you an update on the survey from the first meeting. We will collect your feedback then on the proposed new mitigation actions and have you help us provide a prioritization model for these projects. So this is the raw scores from the first set of meetings. These, these are organized from priority ranking 1. So flooding was documented from the first set of meeting and at an average score of 4.3. So if you'll remember, I asked you to rate each hazard on a scale of 0 to 5, with 0 being that you didn't think it was worth including in the plan and we should just scrap it. 5 being that that hazard posed the greatest threat to your community. So the hazards at the top of this were deemed the most important to your community in terms of the threat to your community. So flooding and utility failure and epidemic were the top 3. The bottom 3 were earthquakes, wildfire, and mine subsidence. We did have 2 incidents of ties. So we had severe winter storms and terrorism. Those were tied at 3.9. Then we had tornadoes and hazardous materials tied at 3.85. So I'd like to open it up for discussion to see if there are any surprises of the order, if anything kind of shocks you and where it fell, and also see what your thoughts are on how we should prioritize winter storms versus terrorism and tornadoes versus hazardous materials. So just looking to help prioritize those 4 in the middle that are tied. So I'll open it up to thoughts.
This is Dave Berger. My recollection is that terrorism includes mass casualty events.
Yes. Yes. Assuming it's terror related or active shooter, that kind of event.
Right. First of all, I'm glad to see that it is relatively high, and I do think it requires us to be engaged and be prepared. So I mean, I'm not sure how to argue that it ought to be higher than severe storms or lower, but I'm glad it's in among the top third of the those identified.
Yeah, I concur with the mayor. I'm happy to see that where that's ranked at here for Allen County. From my opinion, this is Tom with EMA. I would have hazardous materials be the first out of that group of 6, is just giving what we have here in our county, what travels our railroad, what travels out of the refinery complex. That's where we spend a lot of our time working with the LEPC and that hazardous material plant. So I would like to out of that grouping there, that moved up. And then I would probably go with either terrorism or tornadoes next. No heartburn on that one. Again, given what we have here in the county, the tank plant and our CFAT facilities that we have here in the county as well.
With this, I would agree with Tom's assessment, particularly with the likelihood of imminent fatalities associated with the hazardous materials and the tornadoes. I think that the terrorist event, although it would probably result in some fatalities, I don't think it would be on the scale that it would be for hazardous materials and tornadoes. So I would move those towards the up by ahead of severe winter storms, actually.
All right, any other thoughts? This is super helpful for us in terms of developing this prioritization. You'll see the next step, all of the projects are associated with a specific hazard. So in terms of prioritizing those projects, this is really helpful. All right, then we will sort of reorder that based on your feedback, and Tom, that will be included in our next update that we send your way. Okay, so now we are moving on to the mitigation actions scoring matrix, and this will take a significant amount of time. So if you need a little break, I'd say now is the time to do it. If not, we'll just roll right into it. So this is the one survey we'll be doing today. This will ultimately, there's a lot of scoring that we're asking you to do, but it will determine whether a mitigation action is appropriate for your jurisdiction, for the county as a whole. If you are calling in representing the county, we're asking you to think about the county as a whole as you fill this out. If you are calling in representing a jurisdiction, we'll ask you to consider that specific jurisdiction as you fill it out. So this survey, as I mentioned, it is available on the website. If anyone needs help getting a copy, if you need us to email you one real quick, if you are having issues with the website or anything, please let us know in the chat box. I'll go ahead and show you again. So the website is burtonplanning.com/Allen-HMP, and I'll put that in the chat here again. Maybe. There we go. And on the far right tab, Meeting 2 Materials, you'll see here the survey that we'll be doing. There's a printable version. You can print and just fill out, take notes by hand, and then just either fax that or scan it and email it to Tom. Or you can go ahead and click on the online survey, and that'll take you to SurveyMonkey, where you'll be asked to provide your name, and then I'll take you to the survey after that. So I'll go ahead and get started. So this, as part of the hazard mitigation planning process, communities are asked to identify specific projects and activities, and that's what we refer to as mitigation actions that will help the communities achieve long-term outcomes related to specific hazards. So the status of each previously identified mitigation action was reviewed at the last meeting. So all of the actions that were marked as ongoing or deferred, all of the ones that weren't completed or deleted are in this survey, as well as some new mitigation projects that were identified. Either they were brought up at the last meeting or we received feedback in the surveys about them. So we have incorporated those into this survey. So the purpose of this, it's a scoring matrix. It's to determine which actions are relevant to each of the communities within Allen County, and then develop a corresponding action plan that describes how those projects will be implemented. So the scores from this survey will be used to decide how the mitigation actions are prioritized in your community and in Allen County as a whole. So this matrix is asking you to consider 6 things. The first, simple yes or no, is it applicable to your community, to your jurisdiction? You will just indicate yes or no. Let me show you here. First, also put your name and jurisdiction. That is super helpful for us as we are collecting these to keep them organized. So this first column here, applicable to your jurisdiction, you'll either mark as yes or no. And then we ask you to score it based on 5 considerations: the cost effectiveness, if it's technically feasible, if it is environmentally sound or how it might impact the environment, whether it's needed immediately, and then how it reduces risk. So each of those you will rate as 1 through 5. So you can just select the drop down and score those as you think appropriate. So to give you a little bit more of a foundation of what the numbers mean, a little bit of significance. So 1 is the lowest score possible. So for cost effectiveness, if it is a 1, it would be the least cost effective. So this one's a little bit challenging to keep straight. So the 1 is that it's the most expensive project. A 5 means that it's the most cost effective. So it's the most affordable project that you could do. If you are unsure or neutral, please go with 3. We ask that you do complete, if you mark it as yes, that it's applicable to your jurisdiction, that you do complete all of the numbers. So we need 5 scores for each action then. So if you're unsure or neutral, mark it as a 3. But if you think it sways one way or the other in terms of the category you're considering, then either do a 1 or a 2 or a 4 or a 5. So cost effectiveness, again, a 5 is that it's a more affordable project. A 1 is that it's the most expensive project, not really realistic in terms of cost. The second category is technically feasible. This is just the overall feasibility of the proposed project. How easy will it be to complete? If it's a 5, it'll be super easy to complete. It'll be pretty quick. A 1 means that it's not very feasible. It's kind of vague. It doesn't seem like there's really anything actionable about it. The third category we're asking you to consider is environmentally sound. So this, we're asking you to consider if the proposed action, how it affects the environment. If it poses a great impact to the environment, then you would mark it as a 1. If it has very little impact to the environment, I guess we would say very little negative impact to the environment, then you would mark it as a 5. The next category is immediate need. If the project needed to be done 2 years ago or years and years ago, then mark it as a 5. That means it needs to be done as soon as possible. It needs to be done, yesterday. A 1 means that it's not really needed maybe at all. It's kind of a want rather than a need, that kind of thing. Again, if you're unsure or neutral on the issue, then please put it as a 3. And then the final category is risk reduction. How much does completing that action reduce the risk associated with the hazard? And 5 means that it will be the greatest contribution to risk reduction. It'll reduce the risk associated with tornadoes or severe storms. Whereas a 1 means that it doesn't reduce the risk at all. And then at the end of this survey, we ask you if there are any actions that aren't on this list, if there are things that you still want to see included, we ask you to write those down and score them separately. So what I'll do is I'll go through page by page, so that way I provide time for you to review them and score them, and then you can either ask questions if you have them, or we can move on then to the next page. But first, I know that's a lot of instructions and there's a lot of things to consider for the survey. So are there any questions that I should be addressing at this moment? Brett, has anything popped up in the chat?
No, nothing in the chat.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask, post to the group? Okay, does anyone need help finding the survey, getting the survey? You can also message Brett or just unmute yourself and let us know. But we'll go ahead and get started. I'll give you a few minutes to, well, let's go through the first one as an example, and then I'll let you go through the first page and let us know if you have any questions. And after that, we'll move on to the next page. So the first set of actions are related to multiple hazards. So they don't quite fit in specifically with either tornadoes or flooding or hazardous materials, but it's more applicable to a variety of hazards. So the first action says improve and sustain public information regarding evacuation routes and shelter areas by developing emergency information announcements for local electronic and written media outlets. So
Anna,
if you
could you zoom in on your screen?
Oh, yes, I always forget about that. Let's see, is that better?
Yep, that's better.
So this first column asks, is it applicable to your jurisdiction? And if you think it's applicable, if you think no, it's not, you can just say no and not answer any of these other questions. You can just move on to the next action. But if you do think it's applicable to your jurisdiction, you'll say yes, and then rate each of these. So for example, improve and sustain public information regarding evacuation routes and shelter areas. How cost effective would that be? Would it be affordable or would it be more expensive? Let's say anyone from Lima want to chip in. We'll say if we were trying to do this for Lima, what is your impression of its cost effectiveness for this project? You don't even have to give me a number, just like a ballpark, expensive, not expensive. Thoughts? All right. Well, it seems like maybe people are pretty neutral on it, so then we'll just give it a 3. Feasibility of it, improving public information regarding evacuation routes by developing emergency information announcements for local, generate, compared to some of these other projects, I'll say the feasibility of this is probably pretty high, pretty easy to complete and pass it along to written media outlets, so I'd say a 5. Environmentally sound, does this impact the environment? It seems like it wouldn't result in any additional printing, and it could be distributed electronically. So it has very little impact on the environment. So I would say it's very environmentally sound. I would mark that as a 5. Immediate need. Well, this is something that I don't know, to be honest. because I'm not quite sure about what's going on in Lima. So I would probably mark it as a 3. If you think that it's needed sooner, you would mark it as a 5. If you think it's not an immediate need, then you can mark it as a 2 or a 1. And then the final category is risk reduction. So this asks you to consider how much is it reducing the risk associated with related to multiple hazards on a holistic level. So if we're thinking about improving public information, giving people the ability to evacuate or shelter if needed, that can reduce impact to lives in terms of lives lost. So I would either say a 4 or a 5. So that's just one example. It can be a little bit more of a gut instinct as you complete it. But I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to go through the first page and just think it through and ask questions. We'd love to get all of your feedback by today. So we'll go ahead, I'll give you 5 minutes to review the first page, and then we'll kind of discuss it, see if you have any questions. Feel free to post those questions in the chat or unmute yourself and just ask. So I'll go ahead and mute myself unless anyone asks any questions, and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes to review. Okay, so for those of you who are filling this out, are there any questions? I know we've gotten one question in the chat box about question 7, and my apologies, these should be numbered to help us as we're discussing them. I believe it's related to this hazard: develop or update high hazard impacted services and sites along with emergency contact lists. And yes, I believe that is referring to cascading effects from a high hazard, but if Brett or maybe Tom or Travis have any additional comments about that, I welcome that. That was one I forgot to mention. If it says previous, that was included in the previous plan, and it was marked as ongoing from the previous plan. If it's marked as new, that's a new action that was not included in the previous plan.
Yeah, the way I took this action is it's referring to properties or sites that are repeatedly impacted by hazards. And to also include a contact list related to those services or sites.
So is this making sense? I guess I would like a good sense of if people are planning to complete this at the moment, or if they're planning to take it with them, get a sense of who's completing it at the moment.
I'm going to have to complete it later.
Okay.
I'm completing it now.
Awesome. Do you have any questions? Anything not making sense to you as you're going through it? If you haven't done so, feel free to go ahead and move on at your own pace. The first, I think, approximately 30 actions are related to multiple hazards. If you have any comments on those, feel free to just let us know in the comment box, either directly on the survey, or if you'd like to bring anything to our attention directly, feel free to put it in the comment box. Great, I see a couple more posted that they're completing it on SurveyMonkey now. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the more the people that complete it now, the better. That's just super helpful for us. But I know, as I said, a lot of you are busy with everything that's going on in the county at the moment, so no worries. So I'm gonna just skip down through the multiple hazards and just give an example of one related to dam failure and a couple other hazards. But again, if you're doing it on SurveyMonkey, it's harder to skip. So Just go through at your own pace. You'll see things. If there are acronyms that you're not sure about, you can ask about that. Anything that we can do to help make these more clear, just let us know. You see a lot of actions related to public information and making sure that they're up to, that the residents are staying up to date on information and how to stay prepared for hazards. There are a lot related to that. But here on related to dam failure, let's discuss. So one of the new projects that was recommended was to map inundation areas for class 1 and 2 dams. And that would be, Brett, maybe you can talk a little bit more about what that project would look like.
Yeah, so the inundation maps for class 1 dams and class 2 dams, that's something that the OEMA, the Ohio Emergency Management, is looking at closely for ongoing hazard mitigation plans now. It's usually done with an engineer's office, whether you can work with the state on that, and it would basically be modeling the breaking or failure of that dam to see what areas would be impacted by the outcoming water. Your next step after that would be to somehow mitigate those properties or prepare those properties for those dam failures.
Great, thanks.
If that is not clear, please ask clarifying questions.
So it seems like we're getting some good feedback in the chat as well as through SurveyMonkey. So I'm gonna mute myself again for the next 5 minutes or so and check back in then. Again, if you have any questions, if you just want to learn more about a project or bring it up to the larger group and just kind of say, hey, what's the status on this? It's marked as previous, let's talk it through. That kind of conversation is welcome as well. So just let us know. We're here to help you in any way that we can. Unfortunately, we can't complete these for you, but we do appreciate you taking the time to complete these at the moment. So yeah, just let us know. Thanks. We did get a question about how SurveyMonkey works in terms of keeping your survey progress. So if any of you are wondering, if you click on the link, you enter all your information, and you start the survey, and you accidentally close out of the tab or the window, it will save your responses for us on our end, but when you go back to do it again, it will not save your response for you. So you can just pick up where you left off. We do ask that you put your name and all that back in, so that way we know that it's the second part of your survey. But you can just start back where you left off, and we'll combine those surveys on our end, so that works too. SurveyMonkey is a little complex in that way, but we get your results, and that's all that matters. So just let us know if you have any questions. So I know it's a long survey. If some of you have been able to complete it already, that's amazing. When you do get to the point that you're finished, if you would leave a comment in the comment box, so I'm not keeping you here longer than you need to be here. Just let us know when you've completed it, or again, if you have any questions. I know I'm a broken record about questions, but we're here to help in any way we can, so just let us know. All right, well, I'm just checking in to see if anyone needs anything, see how, if it's making sense, if there are any questions. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a couple slides of the presentation here. Just so you all know that the next steps are to provide feedback on the draft version of the plan. After today, probably won't hear from us for a little bit, but then look for us later this fall. Look for a draft plan. We'll be posting that on the website. We'll be sending it out through email. We'll be looking for any comments you have on that plan. Again, that'll come about October, November. So then today, I'm going to leave this slide up here as you finish your surveys. Again, once you finish, if you would just let us know in the chat that you finished so we can know. But I'm going to leave our contact information up here so that way you can either email that to one of us. I'm going to leave my email address here and I'll also post it in the chat. If you finish your survey, if you've done the fillable PDF version, you can just email that directly to me. Or if you've done the SurveyMonkey, once you just complete it, we'll have record of that as well. So again, we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. It makes a difference. It really helps us target this plan to your communities. So we'll just be around here if you have questions as you're filling that out. We also would ask that you send it to your colleagues. The more survey responses, the better, even if they're not the same. You know, it's a survey. So the more responses, the better. If you have colleagues from jurisdictions that are not here, we'd also love for you to, you know, connect with your colleagues across jurisdictions and encourage them to participate. We do need participation from each jurisdiction. It's really important. So yeah, so again, I'll go ahead and mute myself. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. We'll be here. Thanks.